Well, I've been fighting for more than 3 years now, since the day I first set foot in Bradford for the by-election campaign, to transform Bradford schools, which are the second worst in the country. And I proposed what I called the Bradford Challenge, which is a take on the London Challenge, which transformed London schools in the early part of the century. And Tower Hamlets schools in particular were absolutely transformed. Tower Hamlets, which is exactly like Bradford, looks like it, sounds like it. It's an area of London with a great deal of poverty, with a lot of self-employment, a lot of small businesses, high proportion of households where English is not the first language, and yet they're the 15th best schools in the country, and we're the second worst schools in the country. So it makes sense. The people who transformed Tower Hamlets schools should be brought to Bradford to transform ours. I'm beginning to get somewhere on this now. Imran Hussain, the Labour candidate in the Bradford East constituency, has already committed himself to this idea, and I think that we're in with a real chance of this, my very first demand of Ed Miliband, being realised very quickly. Well, of course, it was Labour that began the privatisation of the National Health Service. In fact, Labour privatised the National Health Service almost to exactly a percentage point the same amount as the Conservative government have privatised them. So Labour began this path, like so many other things, you see. The Conservatives tripled tuition fees, yes, but it was Labour that introduced them, and if they hadn't introduced them, it might never have been possible to introduce them. But in the National Health Service, we badly need more spending, more money for equipment, for nurses, for doctors, for staff, for medicine, for all kinds of new technologies that can keep our people healthier and living longer. Instead, the two main parties, Conservative and Labour, are both promising huge cuts in public expenditure. They've both signed up to £30 billion worth of cuts in public expenditure. It's austerity or austerity light. And frankly, there's no need for any austerity at all. Britain is a country that has lots of wealth. It's just that it's spending it unwisely. We have seen one scandal after another affecting child welfare. Our national institutions, our television server, BBC, many other august national institutions have turned out to have been riven throughout the 1960s, 70s, 80s and beyond with abusing of children. Some of the most famous names in the land have gone to prison as a result. An inquiry was set up by the government. Its first chair was forced to resign. Its second chair has yet to begin work. So I want to know, who knew what and when did they know it about the industrial scale of abuse of children? Now, of course, there are people who would like to stereotype some parts of the Muslim community on this matter. Well, I'll tell you something. Anybody who abuses a child is not a Muslim. Nothing could be more un-Islamic than that. And the biggest, most famous cases of child abusers have not, of course, been Muslims. Jimmy Savile was not Muhammad Savile. Sir Cyril Smith was not Ali Smith. These notorious, now notorious, and Greville Janner, Lord Janner, he was not, of course, a Muslim. If any Muslim is involved in this sordid and life-destroying practice, well, as far as I'm concerned, they have forfeited the right to describe themselves as Muslims.
Next question regarding, as you said, George, you want to relocate the magic offices to the Bradford. How it will be benefiting the Bradford?
Well, you know, many cities have greatly benefited from the redistribution of government departments to their cities. In Swansea, in Belfast, in Edinburgh, in Glasgow, and other places, Bristol, there are government departments relocated. We urgently need it here in Bradford. It's not the long-term solution to Bradford's unemployment problem, but it would be an immediate shot in the arm to Bradford's level of employment. Of course, some of the workers who'd be being relocated from London would move. Alhamdulillah, we welcome people moving to Bradford, and it will add to the rich mix of the population here. But most of them probably would not relocate. This would provide vacancies, hundreds, maybe thousands of vacancies for workers in Bradford. For our young people who've got good qualifications, some of them even got good university degrees, but are driving taxis, working behind shop counters, or sitting at home unable to find work at all. Well, you know, just a few miles from here, there are a very large number of Eastern European immigrants to Bradford, and they're very, very welcome. They again add to the rich mix that Bradford is. It's wonderful to see them there, to see their shops opening, to hear their language spoken, to try their food. It's a wonderful thing. But not one of them is told by the government who they can marry. They can bring their wives here. They can bring 10 wives here. And their wives don't have to pass an English test. And they don't have to show that they've earned £18,600 so that they can satisfy a government inspector somewhere that they should be allowed to marry the woman or the man of their choice. This is completely unacceptable. It's actually discriminatory, not just on grounds of race, because it only affects the people from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, and so on. But it's discrimination in terms of class, because it's discriminating against poor people. It's very hard in Bradford to show in black and white that you earned £18,600 a year. It might be achievable in London with more ease, but it isn't achievable in Bradford. So what? We've got a whole raft of young people in Bradford unable to marry the wife or the husband that they want to marry, and all because of this vicious, discriminatory tariff. So our position is this: we will not support any Prime Minister unless he accepts that this pernicious piece of legislation must be swept away and banned.
Last question, George. You demanded the immediate recognition of Palestine. So what is your strategy about this issue?
Well, I have 6 demands of Ed Miliband. 5 of them are about Bradford, but the 6th one is that the British government must immediately recognize the state of Palestine. And if Ed Miliband calls me next weekend because he needs my vote to go into Downing Street, I'll tell him, yes, you can have my vote, but you must do that. And thus, the Bradford Declaration, will enter history as the infamous Balfour Declaration, which caused all this disaster, has entered history in infamy. Let's answer the Balfour Declaration with a Bradford Declaration of independence for Palestine.
Thank you. Thank you, George.
Welcome.